I'm Katie. For anybody who I haven't met or crossed paths with in any of the Discord channels, this session is to talk about partnerships on flow and specifically insights into sport. And I'm going to start with a little bit of background on myself, just so you know the context. I lead partnerships for Dapper Labs with IP rights holders. And so I'm responsible for the NBA relationship. I'm responsible for the UFC relationship. When brands have questions about building in blockchain, I get a lot of those questions. My inbox has been insane, which is why we're talking today over the last few months with the growth and interest in especially NFTs. I come from the IP world or the brand side. My background is mostly in sports, which is why we're starting in sports and not other verticals. But I'm non-technical in my approach. So this is not a technical chat. This is a conversation about, the business side of what I'm hearing from people who want to build in the NFT space. And we're sharing that with you as builders in the NFT space so you can better understand what we're hearing from brands who are coming into this environment. And so most of what I do is really focused on creating value for consumers. And that's going to be a common thread throughout this conversation. I come from a background of consumer facing roles at sports organizations. And so my whole lens of thinking about our NFT world now is how do we make sure that consumers benefit from it and that it's done in a conscientious way. And so we're having this conversation because we are seeing an absolutely massive inbound interest from brands and from intellectual property rights holders of all sizes. We at Dapper Labs are going to build very few things. And so we're looking for ecosystem help so that we can do some matchmaking and introduce brands that come into us and are looking for advisory or for us to build something and introduce them to teams that are building great products. And so we need you guys to be building great products. In addition to that, we want people to be really considerate about the way that they're treating this space because, consumers are coming in to purchase these items. And I think we want to make sure that, the space is somewhere that's safe for an average consumer to come in and explore and experiment. We want, there to be a high level of creativity. The projects that I'm most interested in that I would love to lean in and spend my time on are ones that are not just rinse repeating the same thing that other projects are doing, but are bringing a different lens or bringing a different perspective on consumer engagement. And that people are being responsible in their actions and they're building from a place that will be stable and will be safe again for consumers. And so I see pretty much three big partnership buckets. One of those is sports, and certainly NBA Top Shot has made us a beacon for the sports community. I also get a lot of outreach from entertainment companies. So that might be, companies that own the intellectual property rights for movies, for character-driven storytelling kind of TV shows, musicians, all sorts of other areas of entertainment that people have deep fandom in. And they see NBA Top Shot and they say, we could do that. Like, we think that will work for our brand. We get tons and tons and tons of those calls. And then the other bucket is personality driven. And so a lot of outreach from athletes, but a lot of outreach from musicians and creators, artists, all sorts of individuals who really like the approach that we've taken and want to work with us. And again, we are not going to do everything. We're going to do very, very few things. And so what I want to do here is focus on particularly sports and sports as not totally focused on art. I think we've seen that there are a couple of platforms that are being built, which are great, and I'm sure more will be built that will fulfill kind of this art collector space. But I want to go a level deeper than that and talk about what I'm hearing from the industry so that you can know what the industry is saying in the case that you're not talking to them directly. I do want to cover music as a separate topic, character-driven entertainment as a separate topic, and call it creators, celebrities, athletes, etc., as a separate topic. And so this might be a 4-week long series, but we'll see how this one goes. So I'm going to talk through what we're hearing from them, what we're saying back to them, and what we'd love you to think about building. So the thing that we hear most commonly from IP rights holders is that they want to do some kind of drop. And they rarely say these words this way, but they almost always say the dog whistle is they want to do a short-term activation. They want to experiment in the space, and they want to introduce their, brand to the NFT world in some kind of way. Anytime that I'm hearing that, I'm hearing in my head, you want to do a drop. Sometimes they come and they talk about wanting to do longer term engagements. So they're thinking less about an individual drop and more about doing multiple drops. And so this may be like, if you think about a sports team that might come, and we've had basketball teams, NFL teams, European football teams, cricket teams. We've basically had every kind of sport team that you can imagine reach out to us. And we're not going to build things at a team level, we don't think. And so again, that's why we're sharing with you so that you can be kind of thinking about, okay, how do I think about the product that I'm thinking about or the product I want to build in through the lens of, what do teams want? And so for those longer term engagement plays, they're interested in repeat activation. They're interested in something where they can continually create that relationship with their fans. Some of them are in it for short-term revenue, which we understand we're not huge fans of, because as I've told many partners, you can make $1 million today, but why don't you make $100 million instead over a longer period of time? And so I think we're seeing both sides of it, where there are lots of parties who say, we just want to enter this space and we want to experiment and we want to make sure we don't miss out on this revenue opportunity today. But there are lots more that are interested in creating longer term opportunities. And that's where kind of we come in with the things that we're saying to them. And so whether it's an NFL team or whether it's a basketball team, we always go back to the long-term value of the assets that they're creating. And I'll talk through a couple different kinds of business models in just a bit, because hopefully that's helpful in your thinking about it. But whether it's, us making top shots in the NBA, licensing their IP, or if it was pairing an artist with a brand to do a drop, we really encourage people to start thinking about the long-term value of those assets, because it has an impact on their brand. And so if I'm a sports team and I throw out a bunch of, not really great NFT assets really quickly, they don't look great, they don't have really any thinking about the scarcity model to them, it could have a really negative impact on that brand. You could lose fans, you could have a whole brand perception that you were cash grabbing and that you weren't thinking about your fans when you're doing these things. So we encourage them to start from a place of what do your fans love, and then bring those to market. And I would encourage everyone who's thinking about, how to work with brands in the NFT space to say to themselves, a brand has told me that they want to do this. Are any of my friends who like this sport, or any of my friends who like this team, do they actually like this thing? Is this something that appeals to them? One of the things that we do a ton of on the projects that we do work on is fan feedback all along the way, constantly asking for feedback, constantly asking for, for a temperature check from the market on what things they like and don't like. We did a lot of this in the early days of NBA Top Shot. We're doing a lot of this now as we work towards that UFC product. But you guys can also do that. Ask yourselves, is this thing something that consumers will love, and will it retain its value? Because if it won't, it's fine, right? It's fine to do things that make money in the short term, but they'll be a lot more long-term value. And for you, your platforms will have longer term value if you're considering how to protect the value for consumers. And that doesn't mean that, everybody becomes a millionaire on your platforms. It just means that, I would actually think about it as the amount of fun people are having on your platform is commensurate to the amount that they're spending. And so in NBA Top Shot, if you go in and you say, I just want to make $1 billion, you're not even really the kind of fan we're looking for. We're looking for people who want to have fun in that environment and who enjoy the thrill of the hunt, who like to put together interesting showcases and curate their content in interesting ways. And so think about it from that consumer perspective, because if you build just to optimize for revenue, you're not guaranteed that consumers will come. If you build for consumers and you build for something that people will love, you're always going to have fans of the thing you're doing. And the other piece that we've talked a lot about recently is engagement loops. And so again, when you think about drops that happen over time, what is the storyline about that? Why should consumers keep coming back? Why should they come back every week, even if there's not a drop then? Why should they come back, to engage on the platform or to engage with the brand specifically? And so, on NBA Top Shot, again, we have that kind of concept of challenges and challenge rewards. That's only one way to do it. I'm sure there are kinds of tons of ways that you think about separately that would be a great reason for people to come back and check out what's going on. That's not even necessarily to purchase, or maybe it is to purchase. Maybe it's, tracking value. Maybe it's, checking in to see if they won something. There's any kind of number of ways of doing that, but being considerate about what those engagement loops look like, and not thinking about yourselves as kind of, like a faceless storefront, but rather kind of an engaging place for people to come, I think is something that could serve you really well. And I think, as we've seen, again, so much interest from so many different parties coming in on this, there's lots of different ways you can do that through discovery as well. And so I may be a fan of the Trailblazers, which many of you may know, but I may come back, over and over to a storefront because, some of the other content is interesting, and the Lakers are doing something that looks pretty cool. And even though I'm not a Lakers fan, I really like the visual attractiveness of the NFTs they're releasing, and maybe the Nets are doing something else that's really cool. And those things are happening, at different times and targeting different fan bases, but through a discovery of new content process and through a platform that's thought out really well what those engagement loops are, I may come back over and over, even if my team is not dropping things every week. And so I don't know if that's too abstract. I'm trying to give more kind of tangible examples. A good example is that we've talked to a brand who wanted to do a drop for an event that was happening. And we said, do you maybe want to think about that as not a single drop, but as something that you can build into and something that turns into a complete collection? So you have that kind of, progress bar of getting all of the things associated with it. And then what does that collection mean? Does it mean something for access? Does it mean something for, additional NFT access? Does it mean, does it mean you get something free from your brand? Like, what is the spending on that collection and the curation of that collection mean to the consumer? And they went back and they came up with a much larger, much meatier idea. And I think, continuing to think about the way that you build platforms that can facilitate that and can make interesting experiences for fans could be really great. And then thinking about the things, this is selfish. Again, my inbox is unmanageable, and it's largely because there's so many brands that want to work in this space. And that means there's so many opportunities for you to do interesting things with brands as you build great products, and we start to kind of funnel our relationships into your projects. The things that I selfishly need are more storefronts and more specialized storefronts. And so I said this was just going to be about sports, but we talk to teams that are interested in doing things. We talk to individual athletes who are interested in doing things. I tend to think those storefronts are going to be different. And maybe just to be clear about the terminology I'm using, when I think about NBA Top Shot, I think about it as a payer. It's a storefront, which is where we do drops, and it's a marketplace where there's peer-to-peer transactions and the market economy lives. And so on the storefront, we have quite a complex storefront. We have team pages, we have a drops environment, we do streams, we have all of these different things that encourage people to come back. We implemented a baller status, even though that needs some work. And so that all lives on the storefront side. And then on the other side, we have the marketplace, and the marketplace needs to be super, super customized. And in our case, it needs to get all the way down to player, team, series, set, super, super levels of specificity. And so those are the two sides of it. And so we need more storefronts and we need more marketplaces. Some of the things that, I'm thinking about the sports industry in particular is that when I go and I want to build my Trailblazers collection, I'm going to have Top Shots in there already for sure. But I also may have individual athlete assets in there. And, if CJ McCollum goes and he does a drop and it's not even sports related, it's like wine related art, I'm for sure getting in on that drop if I can. And that'll be part of my overall Blazers collection. It's CJ, and I have Top Shots that are CJ, but I want a marketplace in which I can look for everything that has anything to do with CJ McCollum. And so that to me is a specialized marketplace for sports, less of a generalized marketplace that I can go and transact in anything, which is great too. We need both of those levels. But having specialized marketplaces will make more specialized experiences for people who want to be looking at one specific genre or even one subgenre. I may one day want to go to a motorsports marketplace, and that has Animoca's F1 assets in it, and it has the MotoGP ignition assets in it. And I mean, I can't imagine that a company like NASCAR won't enter the space eventually. And so maybe I have a motorsports marketplace, and there's, a basketball marketplace, and there's a football marketplace, and then there's a meta sports marketplace, which is across all sports. And then there's a slice of the marketplace that is for athletes alone. I think all of those are going to be successful, and they're going to be successful in different ways. And so specialized marketplaces is one side of it. And then that gamified storefront is the other part of it. There's tons of simple ways to create a storefront that can execute drops, but platforms that gamify that process and make engagement loops. And it doesn't have to be a huge gamification. It doesn't have to be super complex. But platforms that have those interesting engagement loops, we're really looking for those. And then lastly, games. I think this is the most complex. But as we think about, some of the, early work in fantasy games, super interesting. I feel like blockchain makes a keeper league on steroids, and I love that. I play fantasy myself. And I think that there's all sorts of interesting ways that, platforms can be really successful and monetize building games on top of NFTs, of building games that employ original NFTs. There are all sorts of kind of different formats to that. But as these brands, again, we're having a conversation about sports. So as these sports brands start to get more and more savvy in the space and start to work their way through the funnel of testing and then growing their presence and then blowing out their presence, I think games is that next step of the big blown out type opportunity where there's a lot of interesting stuff that can happen there. And so in the really near term, we really need kind of more interesting places to send people. And then in the future, we need more complex places to send people. And even for NBA Top Shot, I would call that it's a massive undertaking and incredibly complex, but it's still somewhat simple compared to what the whole game will be once we have the mobile component sitting on top of the web component. And so I hope that wasn't too broad and that was actually directionally helpful. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about before I stop just motoring information at you and hopefully take some questions is business models. And I think this is important because when you consider about the platforms that you may build, there are lots of different ways to monetize. And so there's this platform model, which you would maybe be making fees or royalties for the minting and the drops. In that case, the onus is on the brand to bring art. And because of that, they'll take most of the revenue from it. They bring the thing to you and you mint it and drop it. The agency model is kind of a hybrid where maybe you have a great creative team or you are working with a great creative team and you think that it's actually better for you to execute the art. And then the brand kind of brings the permission to create the art or a collaboration around the art. And then there's, that may have a fee to it, which you charge the platform, or maybe that's a pass through to an artist who's doing the art. And then you are also the platform. So there's the platform revenue. And then the third one is that licensing model, which is basically the Top Shot model. It is by far the highest cost upfront for you. And the brand does very, very little, but then you kind of get all of the upside on it. The part about getting all the upside is you take all of the risk. And so that's something to consider when you look at it. But all three of these are going to be acceptable models for working with brands. And I bring them up because I want to make sure that everyone is thinking about how to make your platform into a successful business. Because what we'd love to see is successful businesses on Flow. And then so just a couple of other things. There's a whole bunch of information about how to actually get started. And so if you're not already building on Flow, these are great resources. And I'm going to publish this presentation so that the links are accessible, but all of this information lives on flow.org, on flow.org. And so there's lots of information about how to get started. Our team wants to help bring great brands to great builders. And so we will do a whole bunch of the work on that. And I think for some of the groups that we have helped and the builders that we've talked to, they can attest to the fact that we're really open to sharing the relationships that we have as long as the platform's in place to do that. And then just a thank you for being part of the community and for joining us. I think this hopefully was the least informational part of the chat. And now I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to kind of revisit any of these fundamentals. Again, part of what we want builders on Flow to understand, to be able to understand, is that we are currently just a beacon for every industry that has questions about entering the NFT space and wants to do so in a smart and a more kind of a meatier way, or like a bigger way. And so we have a huge opportunity to kind of bring some of these IPs to Flow, but we're not going to build it. And so we need you to be building it. So Wei, I don't know if you were going to play MC on this, or if you want me to just hop into that chat and see what questions are in there.
Katie, I can jump in. So yeah, if anybody has any questions, just drop them in the chat and I will read them out loud to Katie. I don't know if we have any in here yet. give you all a moment.
How about a question for the group too? So if you want to answer in the chat, what kinds of brands are you thinking about building with? Or are you thinking about specialization of your platforms, or how are you thinking about that so that I can tailor the information that I'm sharing, that I'm hearing from some of these IP right holders?
Hey, I actually have a question. We're actually buying a football club in Europe, and we're actually looking into different ways to monetize it, right? Because currently, like the monetization forms for existing football club are pretty much like what they are, right? And I think the way I look at it, that flow is that for us, it opens up a completely new vertical of monetization, right? We can actually have a completely different department that is actually dedicated to engage, our fan base, right, and connect that with the football team. So I'm just wondering, maybe you have some ideas or suggestions how individual club owners could actually leverage Flow platform.
Yeah, I think that there are tons of models there. And so there's the fan token model, which, Chili's and Socios is pioneering, where you basically tokenize ownership in the team. For them, it's more tokenizing fandom. You don't actually own a piece of the team, but you could definitely, put team ownership on chain and have that be something that can be micro-transacted. I'm not sure how much of a headache that would be for actual team operations, depending on how decision making is done there. But you can certainly tokenize ownership of any organization and make that part of the way that you do business. When we think about NFTs, we think about them as an additional revenue driver for businesses that also drives value for the fans. And so when we first launched NBA Top Shot, our goal was to have marketplace volume be at least 3 or 4 times greater than our primary revenue, so that both we could ensure that we were making revenue, but also that fans were capturing that value along the way. And so I think if you think about NFTs as an alternate revenue stream or an additional revenue stream, that's certainly interesting from a league or a club level in any sport. And then I think there's kind of the whole concept of the blockchain loyalty program. And if you have that kind of token ownership, whether it's an NFT or it's a fungible token, that creates an access point, or having enough or the right kind of token gives you access to things that you couldn't access otherwise. Maybe field level tickets for a football team, something that maybe is more interesting than just like voting on one of 2 kits that maybe they're both going to be used anyway. I think if you find interesting ways to do that, that could create really amazing engagement loops as well.
Okay, I think what we're going to do instead is, if you just raise your hand, you can ask the questions live. That might be a little easier. But if you want me to ask for you, just ping me if you don't want to speak out loud.
Yeah, I'm going to scroll back up. I saw one that there was a question about how we landed the NBA. And I think that may be helpful. So we landed the NBA partially by having the right relationships and the right contacts to be able to get to the right people at the NBA to talk about doing this. And then when we came to them with an idea that was extremely fan-centric. And it was something that, having sat on their side of the table for most of my career, I could say I would have seriously considered, because I thought the risk was low. The risk of entering something where there could be super negative blowback on your brand is something that generally you want to avoid on the IP side. You're always trying to find safe ways to drive new revenue streams and new engagement. And so the concept for Top Shot that we went into is basically what you see today. We've deviated very, very slightly from what we originally pitched. But what we originally pitched was creating a new economy for basketball fans where you could really own a piece of the action of what happened on the court. And we went in and said, we want fans to own a piece of the action. We didn't say, we want to take your videos and we want to sell them on the internet, because I don't think that would have been as compelling an argument. And so I think when you think about it, start with what will fans love, because what fans love will benefit that brand. And I think, I worked for a long time in social media, and like we just would give and give and give and give content and access and all of these things, but it was very ephemeral. And what is so interesting, and the thing actually when we launched CryptoKitties that my mind switched, was when fans can capture value from it, imagine the relationship that changes. I just made money off of my fandom. That has totally changed my relationship and my decision making, right? I could be watching NCAA basketball and I'm still flipping over and watching the NBA because I want to see what happens with some of the players I have in my collection. And so there are true tangible benefits that I think it's been too soon for us to actually see from Top Shot, but could happen at any level. It could be at a club level where, in New York, people watch less Giants games and more Rangers games because the Rangers have a really great NFT system, and they're all kind of struggling to compete for attention with other teams, other leagues, other types of entertainment. So I think maybe that answered that question, or maybe not. Do you want to call on somebody, Megan?
Yeah. So Jonathan, I think you have your hand raised. And if anybody else wants to ask any questions, just make sure that you raise your hand and then we'll get to you next.
Jonathan, I don't think your speaker's working. Megan, maybe if you go to somebody else and then Jonathan can DM you his question.
Yeah, I think. Why is it not showing? Ryan, I think you also have your hand raised.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Ryan.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for the presentation. It was super informative, and it's good to hear that there's a lot of things, or a lot of people interested in building more platforms and storefronts on Flow. And first off, I want to congratulate. I see Christian. He was in here. He may still be in here. Chris, sorry. Value.market got 1.6 million in funding today. Congrats. That's huge.
I do appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. And my question is, what does Flow offer in the realm of partnerships or funding for broad stroke index marketplaces? Currently, we're actively indexing the Flow blockchain in real time, and all of which will be used for searching as well as analytics on everything on Flow, just not specific or siloed to Top Shot.
I'll let Wei answer in specificity on what our grant programs look like. And maybe you can just DM him your email address and he can send you some more information on the side. I just want to try to there are so many different directions this convo can go in. I just want to make sure we keep it tight to IP partners for now.
Sure, absolutely.
Feel free to DM me and then I can share with you some additional context. We are rolling out our grant program. We have quite a bit of builders or team interested on index data and other services, but happy to follow up afterwards.
For sure, I'll shoot you my email. Thank you.
Megan, did you get that question from Jonathan?
No, I think he's trying to get back into the call, but I think Hassan is here, so maybe he can jump in, or he or she.
Yeah, so I was trying to build something to interact with like the Top Shot blockchain specifically. And I was running into an issue where I think it's only the first 1,000 moments that or the first 1,000 transactions you can actually access exactly what it is, the player name, the price, sale, and all that stuff. All the rest are saved as a moment ID. I was wondering, is that a Flow thing, or is that mainly just a Top Shot thing where they specifically have the rest hidden?
I didn't know that was happening, but Megan, can you take a note on that one? We'll ask the Top Shot team.
Do you mind, DMing me and then I can write that down?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
And Thank you. I think that I'm glad you asked that question though, because we get a lot of questions about how can I do stuff with Top Shot? How can I interact with Top Shot? And I actually think that's a harder path because of all of the permissions that we have to go through, which makes a secondary permissioning process. Whereas, you know, think about the top 5 NFL teams, the top 5 European football clubs, like of global fandom, the top 20 athletes in the world. Like those are the people in my inbox now that I'm like, don't worry about Top Shot, do something for these people. Like they're trying to do so many interesting things. So that's what we're trying to get at here, that like there's certainly like Chris has shown, there's certainly really interesting products that can sit on top of Top Shot. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where that platform goes. I'm a user myself. But I think there's also like a huge opportunity to look at partners outside of Top Shot and say, you know what, I could build something super great for a sports team, or I could build something that's really got a great engagement loop that anybody can use. But, you know, one of those sports teams that wants to talk to you would be a really good use case for me. Because in many cases, NBA Top Shot is a prototype for the industry. It's a use case to show what can happen. And so I think what we want to see is you guys showing what you can do.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Jonathan, I think you're here now, so maybe you can jump in with your question. So I still don't think we can hear you. Okay.
Maybe third time will be the charm.
Yeah, we'll give you a moment to troubleshoot. Robert, I think you're next.
You're just regular on mute.
I think you're just mute, yeah.
Regarding the business model, I was playing around trying to kind of project some numbers on a platform business model, and I got stuck at the point where I think for a platform model to do well, I was thinking like you'd want to rely on the secondary market, and I was wondering what kind of practices are there, or what kind of thoughts are there on like how you can kind of measure or track or even project what the secondary market might look like for an NFT. And I'm interested. It's interesting on the evaluate stuff, like whether you're tracking the activity on the secondary market and can kind of say like which moments are doing better than others. And I'm wondering how you can help kind of understand that part of the business model. And I'm wondering if anyone else out there is kind of thinking about these things.
It's funny you asked that, because I never look at revenue from the secondary market. Like I forget it even exists. When I talk to our league partners about where our revenue numbers are, I almost only talk about primary revenue, because I think the secondary revenue is great, but you're always going to make a small percentage of it. And I think, again, it's looking at it in the reverse circle, where it's like, what do fans want to transact in? And then maybe even if you want to model it out at the initial price of the asset being transacted an average number of times, and that'll be like maybe partially a finger to the wind, but partially you probably could work off of some of the data that's available on NBA Top Shot to say, you know, I think on average an asset is going to be transacted between 2 and 3 times if it retains its value upon each of those transactions, and I make this percentage of it. You start to be able to model into those numbers. And then if you exceed your expectations, or in other words, you make something so great people want to transact in it more than 2 to 3 times, then you exceed your revenue projections. So I think on the secondary market, you definitely can think about it in that way. And then if you make the secondary market a factor of the primary sales, and that's also kind of part of your goals, to make sure the secondary market is transacting in higher volumes than your primary selling, then I think that's kind of an interesting way to link those two pieces.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
One thing to think about too is that I think what's going to happen in the future is that, and I'm sure about Top Shot, is that leagues and teams and athletes are going to want to maintain their revenue structure in that they've been promised in the secondary market, even in third-party marketplaces. And so that's going to be something you also are going to have to work into your economic models, and that consumers are going to have to consider, and that people like us are going to have to consider. when we set our own secondary market percentages, that we leave space for the third party market. And so that if we have Top Shots that are in our own marketplace right now, which they are as part of our product, but then they can be transacted on the third party marketplaces in Flow, that we can maintain the revenue structure so that we can pay our league counterparts what we have to pay them. And then you also can make a cut on top of it. So just think about that when you put in your revenue structures, because you're not going to be able to take like 15% of revenue and then put, our 5% on top of that. It's more going to have to be some kind of combined revenue goal that we don't know what that is yet. It may be that ultimately for future projects, we have to look at dropping our secondary revenue percentage to make enough space for tertiary marketplaces.
Right, and that's where I was starting to think about why I was modeling it, was that to, like you said, take into account the athlete or the person that you're promoting, and then also take into account the owner of the NFT. And it was like, hey, these margins might look really thin. And it's like, I was trying to think through that part. So
yeah,
it'd be interesting to see how people are tackling that challenge.
Yeah. And I think, I don't want to undermine our brand partners for the kind of revenue shares that they can receive, but you can offer a revenue share that will make you a successful business. And if you can't do that revenue share, then it's not, they're not the right partner for you. And that's something to consider too. You may have early partners who are break even or are loss leaders because you want to prove out the product. And that doesn't always have to be where your revenue share sits.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, great. Jonathan actually just DM'd me their question, so I'm going to read it for you, Caty. I'm looking to capture the life cycle of an athlete targeting less valuable players such as G League or minor league baseball. However, I'm having trouble setting up a store at the league level. This is on an individual basis. Do you have any recommendations to appealing to leagues as a nobody?
I think, first of all, you're not a nobody if you come in with a great idea. We were what you would, I walked into the NBA and I laugh at the deck we put in front of them. It was like not even a good choice of font with no pictures. It was so bad, but we really, really believed in the product we were building. And we really, really started with the value to them. One thing to consider though, is that you said two things there that are very different. Leagues do not care about value to athletes, and athletes do not care about value to leagues. They kind of are, the ecosystem is so different. And in most cases, athletes are trying to capture value back to themselves, where the league captures a lot of it. And so when you're thinking about, am I approaching a league with this? Am I approaching an athlete with this? There's a bunch, it's like a matrix. Who has the rights to the content that fans are going to love? And so if it's the league because the players are in their uniforms, then you have to go to a league and say, this is an idea you're going to love, and it's new and it's different and it's, going to be great. And we're going to follow, the best of what these people do, the best of what these people do. We're going to benefit from the things that they did wrong, and we're going to do the right this time. If you want it to be for athlete participation, that may be different than what you go to the league with. And I'm happy if you wanted to send Megan your email to just talk to you about, how we look at NBA Top Shot and all the different constellation of rights we need for it. Because there's a lot and it's not easy. And I think Top Shot is the path of most resistance. But it's also fun, and it's got it's complex, and it's got a lot of stuff to it. You don't have to start out so complex. And I think people who come into the ecosystem now and see what Top Shot is, weren't part of that beta group where we didn't even have a marketplace associated with Top Shot until we went into open beta. So for 3.5, 4 months, we just did primary sales. And it really sucked for the people who participated, like nothing compared to, the queue system we've set up here. Like it would take us 8 hours to do a drop. And I think those people who stuck with us then were rewarded, but we're in just a different environment now. And when you think about the technology being much more stable and the platform being really great, and then the ability to, take a stepped approach to it, I think that's acceptable, and it's something that people should consider.
Okay. I think Richard was waiting next to ask a question.
Thank you. You may have touched on my question briefly here, but outside of the success of NBA Top Shot, what incentive do leagues like the NFL, NHL, MLB have to set up their kind of NFT transactions on the Flow blockchain? And is there a saturation point, essentially, because everyone's trying to migrate to Flow right now, simply because of the success and the technology that you have set up, like you mentioned with the marketplace. So I'm just kind of curious as to what's drawing everybody to Flow. Is it just simply the success of the NBA Top Shot, or is there other incentives?
I mean, just the ability to run 3 million transactions for NBA Top Shot alone in the last 6 months is something we could never have done on another platform, and never have done in this way. And we couldn't have built the mobile game we wanted to build on top of it if it wasn't on Flow. And so, like, the reason that people are coming to Flow is because it's the best option to scale in a way that you can scale for composability. And when I talk to brands, I don't use words like composability. I say, if you want to build a viable licensing model on top of your NFTs, you have to build in a place that you can build on top of your NFTs, and in a place that can run enough transactions for a fan base of your size. And one of the things I keep saying is, everybody's always like, I wish I got in on NBA Top Shot early. And I'm like, what? You're here. It's now. It's early. Like, we have whatever 800,000 registered accounts. There are 1.6 billion basketball fans. Like, we have not even scratched the surface of what this thing is. And so we built Flow to scale not only to our ambitions, but to your ambitions and to everyone's ambitions. And I think what the team is primarily focused on is making sure that we can do that, and we can bring the NFL along for the ride, and we can bring whoever, Marvel, we can bring Star Trek, we can bring whoever else wants to come, is welcome to come to this platform, because you can run enough transactions to have fun and entertaining experiences on chain.
No, thank you.
Great. And I think Andrew was waiting next.
What's up, everybody? So I've been on Top Shot since like early January. So I was here for like the whole parabolic spike, and I'm a huge Top Shot bull, big time NBA fan. But I have been thinking recently, especially with the increase of and the focus on botters and multi-accounters and stuff like that. I've even thought, being a bull myself, about liquidating my account, trying to withdraw, things like that, just because I don't feel like there has been much of a focus on that from the Dapper community, or from the Dapper company. Do you think that they're doing enough to combat these problems? And in addition to that, do you think they're doing enough to combat kind of the supply and demand problem that potentially caused the market to tank, or was that just the market balancing out?
I think there's going to be multiple markets balancing out. So, like, buckle up. And I think, as you know, it's totally a personal question of how you feel like you should invest in NFTs, and where you think a platform is going to be, 5 years from now. And so I think on the question of bots, it has been an extreme area of learning for us. We have some really, really great advisors that have come in to help us try to solve a situation where we want to make it fair for people who come in and who are, playing fairly. And we've gotten help also from our partners. So our CTO, I think just at the end of last week, had a long call with the CTO at the NBA, and they have tons of experience, right? They're involved in the sneaker community. They're involved in all sorts of tickets going on sale, get botted insanely. So we're really just trying to learn from people who are really good at solving that situation. I don't think there's a complete solve for it. I talked to a friend who works in the footwear industry, who is a major host of high profile drops. And when I was like, man, we're having a really hard time with bots, he laughed so hard. He was like, of course you are. If people want it, they're going to build bots to try to get it. And it's going to be like every time you solve a bot problem, there's going to be a new bot problem. So I think what we've learned is that it's never going to be a clean slate. It's always going to be a situation where we're constantly trying to make the environment better and make it fairer and continue to work in that regard. And as far as content availability, I think one of the things that's interesting for anybody in the space to think about is, what does the range of content look like for collectors? My biggest beef with Top Shot right now is that I can't send someone in for a $2 moment anymore. And I want that. I want there to be an entry point. And I think an average fan needs a very low price point to come into an entry point. And so we have to think about both ends of the spectrum. And I think actually everyone has to think about both ends of the spectrum. You could say we're a place, we're the Christie's of blockchain and we only do the highest end assets. But for most of us, we have to think about, how do we get regular people involved? And I think about that not just for NBA Top. I mean, I think about that a lot for NBA Top Shot, but not just for that, but also if I wanted, to get somebody involved in crypto art, there's lots of really low cost options to get people just trying and experimenting. And as Dapper Labs, our company goal is to bring the benefit of blockchain technology to average consumers. And so just the fact that many people now have wallets on Flow is incredible. Like, we're already kind of starting to bring to fruition that kind of mainstream dream that we have. But to get more people into these products, there need to be all sorts of price points. And so there's always going to be high end, there's always going to be low end. And our market balancing is not, maintaining the highest end of the market. It's actually maintaining the whole market and maintaining the low end of the market as well.
Yeah. A quick follow-up to that, and I'm sure this question has been asked a billion times internally, externally, everywhere, but is there a reason why KYC isn't handled upon sign up? And because I feel like that would kind of be the solution to all, not the botting issue, but obviously the multi-accounting issue, which, I mean, I've heard from friends who are multi-accounting. I've reported those people straight to Roham like weeks ago, and it's still happening. So I'm just curious about that question.
Anybody who builds products is going to tell you eliminate friction at onboarding and then create points along the way that's going to create that kind of, that identity verification and that deepening. And so, it's really important to us to not create too much friction up front. And I think the things with KYC are actually, it's a great thing to talk about because it's something that every other IP partner should care about. One of the things that makes Flow and the Dapper wallet great for consumers is that we have a fraud protection team. And part of the reason that we've been slow is because our team was too small and we grew too fast. But as our team gets bigger and it happens more quickly and we give options, I mean, ultimately we want people to be able to opt in to KYC at any point, right? Like the ideal would be, I'm in a boring meeting, I'm going to go finish my identity verification, like that actually is an ideal for us. But as we scale up, we're hoping to be able to do more of that, but we don't want to prohibit people from participating in, again, and gateway drug activities of, checking out the marketplace and being able to purchase in small amounts before they trigger that. But there are pros and cons of both approaches. We've taken the perspective that we want to make sure that we can get people into the product and get people sampling. But of course, that for any platform is going to be a question. And it might actually be a question of what kind of platform are you building? And is that a platform you want to scale, or is that a platform that you want to be really, really small and exclusive?
Yeah, totally. Sorry to drag this on, but as a product manager, that was a lot of, I'm a product manager myself, so I think about this stuff a lot. So in terms of the reducing friction, this is more of a comment instead of a question. In terms of reducing friction, I definitely agree with that in terms of the sign up flow, you want to reduce friction there. But I think there should also be kind of an equal focus on quality, users over the quantity of users. And that's kind of my last comment. Thanks.
I think I have maybe 5 or 10 more minutes. You want to take a couple more questions, Megan?
Yeah, I will take them in the order that they're coming in. Okay, so Matt, I think you were waiting next.
Yep. Hi team, I'm Matt from New Zealand. I just want to firstly congratulate Caty, Roham and your team, especially in the launch of NBA Top Shots. It's still early days in terms of being in beta. I think I'm finding also a lot of new consumers as well that are wanting to join NBA Top Shot that I had completely no idea they're into basketball, but they're starting to hear about NFTs, collectibles. So I just wanted to congratulate yourself and your team on the hard work that you're doing. I know there's a lot of, bugs, errors, or learning curves especially, and we'll look back at this experience in 10 years time, and your team will probably laugh and look back like, wow, that was just the stepping stone to something huge in the years to come. So just wanted to congratulate you firstly. So my question is, with the explosion of NFT and the Flow blockchain, is there capacity to introduce a brand, for example, like the All Blacks rugby team, which is probably, if not one of the biggest brands that is partnered also with Adidas globally? And is this something Flow would consider, or does the sport have to be mainly US based?
Oh, no, definitely not US based. I mean, we've seen projects that are focused on India and the Indo region for cricket. I think rugby is and rugby's not only kind of a New Zealand, Australia based sport, but of course huge in Europe as well, and growing in North America. So no, I don't think so. And I think, we'd love to see, other organizations help us attract global interest. I mean, I've been pretty happy with Top Shot and how international we are for our, really our team being North America based and us being pretty North America centric, but we would love to see that. We'd love to see more activity in the Asia Pacific region. We'd love to see more European teams building stuff for their regions. And I think we'd like to build some of that stuff too. We probably won't build at the club level, so the All Blacks are all yours, but I can imagine there's any number of haka that I'd love to collect as well.
Cool. Thank you very much.
We're going to jump into David's question next.
Yeah, hi Caty. Congrats as well. It's amazing what you have done. As you were discussing that there is very little friction when it comes to onboarding new users and getting into it. It's mainly due to the experience with the wallet, right? With the Dapper wallet that you offer. But it's currently not available to developers, which you probably know of, right? And therefore, there is no chance for anyone else at this moment to create any sort of like a good onboarding experience. Do you have any estimate on when the wallet is going to be available?
I don't have a timeline, but I think that we're trying to help other wallet teams as well create good onboarding experiences. And I don't know if you've tried the MotoGP Ignition registration process, which uses Blockdo wallet, but that one is pretty easy to use. I mean, maybe not, I actually have not gone through a full purchase flow with it yet, so I can't speak all the way to that, but I was overzealous and probably annoying in giving them some marketing and copy feedback recently. So, we're leaning in on those projects as well to say, hey, here's some ways that you can make even, these other onboarding things maybe a little better by adding more information or changing the way language appears or some of those things. I don't have a timeline on the Dapper wallet, but I share your sentiment where I think that for mainstream consumers, there has to be that easy onboarding. And so I hope that we're not the only wallet who's able to achieve that on Flow as well. And I hope other wallet teams are thinking about it, which I truly think that they are. But Megan, maybe we can take that as a takeaway as well to check in on the wallet team and do a status update at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. That would be super helpful. Thank you so much.
For sure. Okay, one more and then I gotta run.
Right. Perfect. Aaron, I'll let you jump in.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay? Perfect. So, this is awesome. Thank you, Caty, Dapper. Echo kind of what Will and David said, also Canadian. It's really cool for Canada to be doing such amazing things in the crypto space, blockchain space. What's exciting to me, kind of, Caty, is you're talking opportunities, right, to partner. And I guess I would just be interested if you could like describe simply what's an ideal partner for Dapper Labs in helping companies access the Dapper ecosystem. What's Dapper going to be doing 3 to 5 years from now? What are those good partners going to be doing 3 to 5 years from now that like differentiate themselves in a hyper competitive market, right?
So we're probably only going to build a couple of things, like out the application layer, and that's it. So basically everything else is going to be built by all of y'all. So I think the best thing to do, and I think what is probably really actionable for teams that are building products and they want to see if they can find themselves a flagship partner to work with, is to start to put together a like legitimate pitch deck for your product. What is it? Why is it interesting? What is the benefit it brings fans or it brings consumers? What are those engagement loops that you're focused on? And it doesn't have to be shiny. It can be words. Someone recently sent me a really well thought out Notion page that was just bullets of what the phases of their project was going to be. And I was like, okay, I can see your vision for this. I can see where you want this product to go. And then like on the tech side, I know that, we're hiring up on the kind of ecosystem developer manager type roles on our side. And so somebody else I'll say, hey, I think that this person pitched something really great to me. You go look at what they're building and tell me that the code is sound and that I should feel comfortable with them. And then I'll just, match make partners at that point. And I think that's the way that I'm looking at it now. I'm doing probably more digging for good projects than I'd like to be doing. I would love for you all to come to me with your great projects so that I don't have to go searching for them. But I think that's it. And I think when you think about your project as a business like that, of here's where we are, here's where we want to be, 3, 6, 9, 12 months from now. And here's who we think ideal partners to activate with are because of their fan base, because of the kind of assets they have. Those kind of things will be immensely helpful for us to help you as well. And I think we've said it many times, but we're going to get behind the projects that are built in this ecosystem, and we're going to be as much help as we possibly can. And so think through your business cases yourself. And I'm always happy to give a review. I will have to figure out how to set up an email box for that so that you don't get lost in the sheer insanity of my current email box. But like everybody on our team is putting in time every weekend, every night, trying to help builders, trying to answer support tickets on Top Shot, trying to make this ecosystem a success. And so just come to us with your ideas and we'll give you feedback on them.
No, that's awesome. Thank you. Like, I'm not a coder. I'm not a computer person. I've like lost wallet keys and I'm trying to move Ether and wrap it. But I understand the user base. I have a sense for the future, right? And I think there's going to be so many cool applications in months and years and decades. So that's why I was kind of curious about how you're thinking about it. It just sounds so exciting, so awesome. So thank you.
Yeah. And go join, if you're not already in the Discord group, go join the Discord group. I'm sure there's no shortage of teams that are looking for business side people who can help, because it's not as easy as it seems to do business modeling and to do marketing planning and to do messaging. And you can be a really great builder, but you still need all of those pieces as well. And so I think just like checking out the projects that are in there would be interesting for business side people as well. Please tell us what you want to learn more about. Pop into Discord, tell Wei what you want these sessions to be about, because I'm happy to deep dive on anything on the business side and be, again, just share as much as we possibly can, because you guys are all going to be, and apologies, I'm trying to not use guys. I'm trying to be more gender neutral. Y'all are going to be the ones that are really building this industry, and we want to make sure that we can connect the dots and we can be as supportive as possible, and we can be generous with our time. So thank you.